Good morning. The Bible says in James chapter 4 verse 14, "For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away." There's probably two groups of people this morning. Well, probably three groups. One group is students who are excited to go back to school. You've been looking forward to this day for 8 or 9 weeks. There are some who don't really look forward to it. You would much rather have stayed up till 5 or 6 in the morning, maybe playing video games, and then enjoy sleeping in the rest of the day. And then there's probably many who fall in the middle between kind of hating school, in all honesty, or really, really, really loving school. But there's two things that are true this morning for those of you as you start back to school. Number one, that the day is going to come in maybe a couple of years where you're going to look back on this day and you're going to think, man, time has passed by so quickly. Now I'm entering 12th grade, and it just seems like yesterday I was entering 9th or 10th. The day may come a little bit longer than that when some of you are entering 10th grade or 11th grade, and you're going to look back and you're going to say, man, it just seems like back in 2021 was just yesterday when I started 4th grade or 5th grade or 6th grade. But the second thing is also true, that not only are you going to look back on this first day of school and say, man, time has gone by so quickly, before you realize it, the day is going to come where you're going to try to look back and not even be able to remember this first day of school because time passes by so quickly. Now, the fact that these days are going to pass so quickly, so fast that you may not even remember it, does it mean that they're not important? Well, no, it doesn't. Ultimately, the main truth, the most important thing is God. And if He is most important, then studying about Him, finding out about Him so that we can know Him and love Him and follow Him and serve Him and give our lives to Him and glorify Him, well, then that is the most important thing we can do as we know this most important person. But one thing I want you to think about as you go back to school today and then for the remainder of this year is that sitting in a church or sitting in a Sunday school class is not the only place that you can find God and learn about Him. Some of you are going to be taking math classes that just seem so hard. But I want you to remember that as you study that math, in effect, what you're also studying are the orders and the structures that God has given to this universe numerically. You can find God in math. Some of you enjoy reading. Some of you, like me, maybe struggle with maybe disabilities or not disabilities, but maybe you struggle with reading in English. Those of you, I want you to realize that as you study, as you read, as you learn grammar, as you read literature, you are studying one of the greatest things that God has given to humanity, and that is the gift of language. Why do we have language? Well, so that God can communicate with us, and we can communicate with Him, and we can communicate to others about Him. So even in your English class, you can see God's hand. Some of you are on the other end. Maybe you don't care so much for language and literature. Maybe you enjoy science and the sciences. Well, as you study that, I want you to see God's order and God's creation and everything in the world that God has made. You can see God's creative fingerprints. Some of you, maybe you enjoy political things and government affairs. And as you study social studies and world governments and world civilizations, I want you to remember that every group of people that you study about, they are created in the image of God. And at least in some way, you can see something about God as you study the people in this world that God has created. Some of you are going to take classes, maybe some elective classes in music or maybe even computer coding or robotics. And you say, Tony, where is God in that? Well, side note, I did a little paper about that recently, earlier this year, that all of these things like music and computers and technology, those are all gifts from God, as God has given us, who are made in His image, the ability to also create and innovate and develop things further and further for His glory. So as you start back to school today, I want you to think, God, I want you to pray, God, where are you in my classes? And if you pray that, and if you go to school not looking to be popular, not looking to have a lot of influence, but if you go to school today in that math class, in that English class, in that science class, if you go to school looking through, not at those things, but through those things, hoping to see God ultimately as the foundation and the creator of them all, then you may find out, as Paul said in Acts 17, that this true God whom we worship, he's actually not that far from every one of us. He's so close to us that you can even find him there in the classroom.